Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Data-Driven Sales Prospecting. I'm Sarah Duffy, the Marketing Manager here at Intronis, and I'm happy to be moderating today's session. Today, I am joined by Carrie Simpson, founder of Managed Sales Pros, a lead generation firm dedicated to providing new business opportunities for MSPs. Before we get started, let's do some brief housekeeping. During the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them using the questions or chat panel to the right of the GoToWebinar screen. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey. Please take a moment to tell us what you think so that we can continuously improve the content and quality of our online events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to today's presenter. Take it away, Carrie.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to present today. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Carrie Simpson. I'm the CEO of Managed Sales Pros, and we've been in business for a little over 3 years now, and we've used cold calling to build our business from zero to a little over $2 million in under 3 years, using pretty much nothing but teleprospecting. So I feel like we know our stuff. I've been doing this for 20 years. We're working with about 30 MSPs in North America right now. And I am still cold calling every week myself, either on our client's behalf when I need to solve a problem or for our own new business. And mostly I'd still do that because I enjoy it. We've learned a lot over the last several years. And one of the things that we learned the hard way ourselves is that when our data wasn't immaculate, our results were less than amazing. So we started using this phrase, and I know this is an old joke on a cash rules everything around me. I think it was a rap video, I don't remember, but here data rules everything. So I want to talk a little bit about why we feel that way, what we learned, how we managed to improve, the consequences of not maintaining and managing your data, and some things at the end that you can do immediately to start improving your culture and creating one that values data as an integral part of their sales focus. So we're going to talk about why data-driven prospecting is essential for sustainable sales success. I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of data integrity in effective sales forecasting. We're going to talk about data integrity and how that applies to sales succession planning. And then we'll talk about creating a corporate culture that values data integrity. And then there'll be time for questions at the end. So thanks again for joining me, and let's get started. So the term data integrity, I mean, I'm sure we didn't make that one up. We just started using it. But to me, data integrity means a couple of things. So when you look at the word integrity, it's got a couple of meanings. One of them is, honest and righteous and moral and virtuous, and the other one is whole. So when I think about this, I think about doing business with somebody that you know to have high integrity, or working with somebody that you know to have high integrity. If they give you advice, you will likely take that advice and act on it because you know that they are behaving in an ethical way. They have integrity. So you can make informed decisions based on the information that they give you. Your database is the same way. You can make informed decisions if you know that your database has integrity. If people are just throwing random garbage in there, making things up, forgetting things entirely, and skipping steps, you don't have integrity in your database, and you are unable to make informed decisions based on the information that you have at your disposal. So the state of being whole and undivided, you want everything in your database. You want as much information as possible in there, and you want it all tracked, managed, and maintained exactly the same. So it shouldn't matter whether I'm putting information into the database, or Tracy's putting information into the database, or one of our callers is putting information in. They all know what's expected of them. They all know how important it is. And that comes down to something we're going to talk about at the end of the webinar, which is how do you create a culture that values that data integrity? So data integrity is clean, up-to-date, useful data that is stored in ways that allow it to be sorted, managed, and retrieved quickly and easily. So if you wanted to ask me a question about any of the people that are listed in our database, any MSP in North America that you want some information on, I would be able to find that information at the click of a button because we have data integrity. Everything is stored the same way. Everything is managed the same way. All notes are taken in the same way and in the correct spots. So I can use that data to decide perhaps I want to do a campaign that is going to approach MSPs that have more than 10 employees that are using Intronus and that are not using Kaseya. I can do that because of the level of data integrity available to me in my database. It is essential for long-term sales success. So if I look at, for example, our sales process year 1 versus our sales process now in year 4, we are able to do a whole lot more, and we know a whole lot more because we've managed that data over such a long period of time. So I have a question for everybody. How often will one call or one outbound touch, any kind of touch, it could be an email, it can be whatever you're using to interact outbound with your potential customers, how often will one call result in an immediate sales opportunity? So there's a poll open now. If you guys want to put your answers in there, you've got 3 choices: 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000, or 1 out of 2,000. So go ahead and answer that. It's quite the battle here. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds. I think probably everybody's answered by now. So can everybody see the results, or do I need to share the results, Sarah?
They can see the results right now.
Okay, so the answer is 1 out of 2,000, and 20% of you answered that one correctly. So out of every 2,000 outbound calls, you'll identify an immediate sales opportunity. So what's an immediate sales opportunity look like for you? Maybe it's a little bit different for our company, but you're looking for something that's qualified by size, so more than likely more than 20 users, has an immediate requirement, so under 90 days remaining on a current contract or is prepared to make a decision in the next 90 days, has an appropriate budget for managed services. So there's no point in you going to a meeting with somebody that's currently paying $150 a month to support their 20 computers if you're going to charge them $150 a seat. You're never going to close that gap. So do they have an appropriate budget? And will they agree to meet with you and review immediately? So that is the perfect storm of managed services opportunity. We come across that 1 out of every 2,000 calls that we make. So poll number 2, how many hours do you think it takes to make 2,000 phone calls? And let's assume that you're using the same kind of technology that we are. So we use a click-to-dial technology. We're not sitting at our desks picking up the phone and putting down the phone. So how many hours do you think it takes us to make 2,000 phone calls? Almost everyone's done voting. And most of you are correct. It would take 120 hours to make 2,000 calls. So bearing in mind that that would be a really ineffective 3 weeks. So that's 3 full-time weeks. So you'd have to have one person dialing out all day, every day for 3 weeks to make those 2,000 calls and to get that one perfect opportunity. So that's 1.5 sales appointments a month-ish, assuming that every month was good, and your average close ratio, if you're like most of our clients, would be 1 out of 3. So you might close 4 deals a year. So you're going to dial the phone all day, every day for 4 deals a year. Not a bad go if those 4 deals are each 100 seats, right? I mean, the ROI would definitely be there. But how do you increase those odds? I mean, do you want to sit on the phone all day, every day to only sign 4 deals a year? Probably not. Data integrity is the key to increasing that number. It will tell you what you need to do and when you need to do it. So let's talk a little bit about how that applies to sales forecasting. So proper sales forecasting is important because it allows you to budget, staff, and plan efficiently for multiple years instead of quarters. So you shouldn't ever be put in a position where you don't know how much business is potentially going to close next quarter. You don't want to scramble to staff people who aren't going to be representing your brand really well because you haven't had the opportunity to train them properly. And you don't want to onboard expensive assets who are going to sit staring at the wall while you wait to potentially sign new business and you have no idea when that business is coming in. So proper sales forecasting is essential to maintaining your margins. Data integrity will make that easier. I think part of the problem with sales forecasting for MSPs and for a lot of businesses are they are using a traditional sales forecast when they're building their processes. So I don't want to get too technical into why it's flawed, but there are 5 stages here. You bring something into your database, so either your CRM or your PSA, whatever you're managing your information in. And it starts as a suspect, you don't know anything about it. You convert it to a prospect once you've made contact. Then you identify the decision makers and they become a contact. Then you decide that there is an opportunity there, it becomes an opportunity, and then you close the business and it becomes an account. So that is a traditional sales forecast, and I believe that it's flawed. I think to better understand the role that data integrity plays in prospecting and forecasting, you need to imagine your sales funnel as 3 sales funnels. So there isn't just one sales funnel forecast. There's 3, and they all play a different role. And every piece of data in your organization is going to live in one of those 3 funnels. So we call that the 3 funnel forecast. So the 3 different stages look like this. You've got net new data that lives in funnel 1 until it's qualified, and those are your data integrity stages. Then you've got qualified data that you manage until it becomes a first sales appointment. Those are your process steps. So just because something is qualified doesn't mean that it's a great opportunity. Like just because they're big enough and they have enough money to use managed services doesn't mean that they're going to convert right away. They could be engaged with a competitor. They could be engaged with that competitor for another 2 years. It might take you 90 days to close a piece of business, and it might take you 2 years to close that piece of business. So things are going to live in that second pipeline for a long time. And if you're using a traditional forecast, your forecast will make it look like your sales reps are really ineffective. They can't close anything. But really, anything that's living in that second pipeline can't be closed. It's not ready. It's still being babysat. So if you push all of your data into one funnel, your funnel looks really ugly. It looks like people are underperforming when, quite frankly, they could be doing a great job. They've just got a lot of leads in their pipeline that aren't viable yet. So the third pipeline, that's the money pipeline. That's from first sales appointment to close deal. So that's when somebody finally gets in front of a potential prospect. So funnel 1 and funnel 2 fully complete, and then they close the deal. So that's really where your financial forecasting comes in. The other 2 pieces are separate. So if you wanted to maybe look at it as this is a marketing function and this is a sales function, or this is a pre-sales function, a marketing function, and a sales function. There's a lot of stuff going on in the sales pipeline, and if you're all stuffing everything into one funnel, most of the time it looks like everybody's being really ineffective, and you're also usually forecasting incorrectly because you're tying revenue numbers to deals that have no chance of closing within a reasonable period of time. So if somebody converted, for example, a lead to a contact to an opportunity, saying like, yes, they're going to be prepared to look at somebody new in the near future, and then you tie the amount of revenue that's associated with that lead to that lead. So let's say that's got 100 seats times $100 a seat times a 3-year contract. That's a pretty nice revenue number. You tie that to the opportunity, but really that's giving you a false understanding of what your sales pipeline looks like because that deal is still 2 years away from closing. So the stages that we've identified in funnel 1 look like this. There's 4 of them. Net new. This is untouched data from any lead source. So you buy a list from somewhere, or you build it, or you get your Chamber of Commerce directory, or you get an association list. any new data that you know nothing about from anywhere. Stage 2 is touched data. So you've had initial engagement and you've learned as much as you can, probably from a non-decision maker influencer. So somebody answered the phone and you were able to qualify them a little bit just talking to the receptionist. How many desktops are there? How many computers are you supporting? Do you outsource your IT support? There's lots of ways to qualify information without actually speaking to a decision maker. The next stage is active 1, which means we're actively working the lead at a regular cadence, but it hasn't been qualified or disqualified. So we still don't know anything about their budget. We still don't know anything about their timeline. We're not sure who they're working with. We don't know any of the things that we need to know to determine whether or not this is a lead that should be moving on to the next funnel. And then qualified, confirmed everything, meets all the required parameters to move forward by size, by vertical, by technology dependency, and current IT infrastructure. And this is done by talking to people, not guessing. So once you've reached that stage in the funnel, that piece of data moves on to funnel 2. And funnel 2 looks like this. There's 3 stages. Active 2, you've got a regular sales cadence applied to the lead based on interest and contract end date. And you've assigned them into a bucket for other marketing initiatives. So if somebody's identified that the only thing they're interested is in backup, and they're only prepared to talk about it in 6 months, that's their bucket. They're 6 months away from closing, and they get marketed to with a message that rolls around backup. They don't want to hear about the other things. When you move into the third funnel and you go sit in front of them face to face to close that deal, then you're going to talk to them about the other things that you can offer them. But currently, they're in a bucket, and that bucket is backup, and that timeline is 6 months from now. So you're going to build everything backwards with that prospect from that 6-month timeline. Follow-up requested means we've engaged with someone with authority and we're in the process of trying to schedule a meeting. So it could take a long time to get from stage 1 to stage 2 if people are busy or really just resistant to the idea of sitting down with somebody. The third stage is first appointment scheduled. So in our company, this is where we take opportunities to. We take the lead to that first sales appointment, ensuring that the lead is qualified and interested and has accepted a sales meeting. Once the sales meeting is complete, it moves on to funnel 3. And funnel 3 looks like this. And it's not easy, right? People assume that they're going to go on a meeting and they're going to close that meeting, it's going to be over. Funnel 3 can take a long time. First sales appointment attended, which means you've gathered the information and you've confirmed that their interest. Then they move into active 3, and this is marketing at the right cadence for the opportunity. So have they identified that they are in fact going to change providers soon? At this point, you should know that, and if the answer isn't as soon as you'd like it to be, you're still going to have to market to that lead. It doesn't just get thrown in the garbage and ignored. You still have to continually reach out to them. We see a lot of clients struggle in this funnel. They go sit the meeting and they're expecting a referral-based appointment. So if you've ever gone on a referral-based sales appointment, you walk in the door, everybody's happy to see you, there's lots of trust built, somebody's brought you to their attention, and the odds are you're going to walk out of there either with a contract or close to it. Not so when you're sales prospecting. So next phase, proposal out. And I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but I can tell you that I sent out probably a dozen proposals last year that just never came back to me. Stage 4, proposal's been reviewed. Stage 5, the contract goes out. And again, that contract could go out and never return. So you've got one more stage, and that's closed won or closed lost. So you've got 13 stages versus the traditional 5, and what this is going to do is help you accurately measure where everything is in your pipeline. It's going to allow you to more accurately see what's happening in the next 6 months, in the next 18 months, in the next 24 months. Your funnels will be far more accurate, and your revenue predictions will be far more accurate. So all stages in funnel 1 are focused on data integrity. And that's funnel 1 again, if you want to take a quick peek over the 4 stages that are involved. Funnel 1 creates your foundation for long-term sales success. So if you're not doing the work and showing the work in funnel 1, so for example, if your sales prospector just dials, 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 doesn't take any notes, doesn't update any user-defined fields, funnel one essentially means nothing to you. You don't have a foundation for sales success because you have nothing to build on. You just have a whole lot of outbound dials with no information associated to them. Funnel one is really going to tell you how long it takes you to make initial contact with anybody. Is it 19 dials or is it 4? So why is this helpful? It's helpful because when you hire a salesperson, you need to know if it takes 19 dials or 4, because if it takes 19 and you hire a guy who can do it in 4, you want to pay that guy a whole lot of money and never let him go. But if you know it takes 4 and you hire someone and it's taking 19, you know that you've made a horrible, horrible mistake and it's time to move on. So there's lots of ways to use your sales forecasting funnel to predict how well your team is performing, but only if you have those data integrity pieces built. So your funnel should tell you how big is the potential opportunity, who makes the decision, what is the process for making that decision, who are they working with now, what do they spend right now, and most importantly, when are they going to be open to changing their current solution provider? And I say this all the time, but reasonable people do not break their contracts just because they're moderately unhappy with their service provider. If something horrific or catastrophic happens, sure, they are probably going to leave. But most of the time, people will ride out their agreements until they end. So even the best salesperson making the best sales call in the world isn't going to bump an incumbent provider and may never bump that incumbent. Maybe there's a personal relationship. There's lots of things that you won't know until you move on to the next funnel. So funnel 2 takes all of that clean data and makes it actionable. Funnel 2 is your process stage. Those are the 3 stages in funnel 2. If you want to take a quick peek at those one more time. If your data is clean in funnel 1, your follow-up activities in funnel 2 are targeted, timely, and meaningful, which means you're not taking a huge spray and pray approach to your marketing. You're marketing to a defined set of people, right? These people said they were interested in talking about backup. These people are interested in learning more about security. These people we know are in a managed services agreement with company X, and we know they fall down here. So we want to create a message that speaks specifically to that, and we want to blast that message out to them over and over again. Funnel 2 only works when funnel 1 gets the appropriate amount of attention that it deserves. Your process is going to be reliant on data. Funnel 3 is your sales funnel. All the activities that take place from the minute you get that first meeting until the deal closes. Funnel 3 doesn't exist without adherence in funnel 1 and execution in funnel 2. So what does that mean? If people aren't doing their jobs correctly, if your sales prospector or your sales rep or whoever you're working with to create your outbound sales process, if they are not taking accurate notes, if they are not filling in user-defined fields where they should be, if they're not accurately tracking their activities, you're not going to be able to be successful in that final stage of the sales process, right? Remember the discussion at the beginning of the webinar where you get 4 deals because you lucked into them? That's all you ever get. All that work only ever leads to 4 deals because you haven't accurately managed or tracked anything else. And if you're happy with 4 deals a year, great. You don't have to listen to the rest of the webinar. But if you want to close more often, data integrity will be the key to that. So execution in funnel 2 means process, right? When you start continually doing follow-ups and marketing and then following up on those marketing follow-ups, that should all be timed very specifically to specific action items. So if nobody's ever asking the question, when does your current contract expire, or when would you be open to having a conversation about working with a new provider, or when might you be interested in receiving a competitive quote, if those questions never get asked and those answers never get put into anything where they can be easily accessed, all of a sudden funnel 2 is just a whole bunch of spray and pray guessing. That doesn't lead to closed deals in funnel 3. So, favorite movie, Groundhog Day. What would you do if you were stuck in one place and every day was exactly the same and nothing that you did mattered? So prospecting in year one looks like this: 4 deals as you deal with data integrity. So it's a frustrating year. In your first year of outbound prospecting, if you hire a guy full-time and you've got a ice cold list, don't expect miracles from that guy. Expect 4 deals to close by the end of the year. Maybe he gets luckier, maybe he brings a book with him, maybe a lot of things, but all things being equal, that's what you can expect. Year 2, things start to get interesting because all of your follow-ups are focused. There's no missed opportunities. You've got a strong pipeline. Data isn't falling out of your pipeline nonstop. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that applies to succession planning shortly. Year 3 is the magic year. All leads in your funnel should be known to you and qualified. So there's no wasted calls at all. You know everybody in your pipeline. You've managed and tracked everything meticulously, so you know who they're working with. You know when they're going to be a viable opportunity. So when are they going to buy something? You should know that. And the cycle starts over with no guesswork. So you're not doing all of that initial. If you look at funnel 1, there's a lot of garbage there. You're taking out a lot of garbage. Every list you buy is going to be 30% garbage, and lots of the rest of it will be inaccurate. So year 1, data integrity. Year 2, process. Year 3, gold mine. But if you abandon the process at any point during those 3 years, you're starting over again. All right, so without data integrity, prospecting is Groundhog Day. You're just grinding the phone over and over and over again, hitting the same data with absolutely no progress. And this is even more evident in organizations that experience a high level of sales churn. So if you can't hold on to your sales reps, if they keep leaving and you keep starting over again from scratch, all you have is Groundhog Day. Everybody starts from ground zero. So one thing I like to point out is not interested is not a stage. If you go back to that funnel and look at it, if somebody says that they're not interested, they don't leave your pipeline. Lost opportunities eventually make their way back to funnel 2. So even if at the final proposal stage they say, no, thank you, I'm not interested, you keep them in your sales pipeline. You continue to market to them. 2 years later, they're going to be looking for another provider, or maybe their new provider doesn't give them what they need. You continually check in with people, whether they're interested or not interested. Nothing falls out of the pipeline unless it's disqualified or you win it. We like to call that restraining order prospecting. So why is data integrity so important to sales succession planning? We talked a little bit about why it's so important to have all that data in your system. Let's talk now about why it's so important to manage the people that are putting the data into your system. Succession planning is planning for turnover, and that it's going to happen. You know, it doesn't have to be chaos though. So data integrity is the thing that ensures smooth transitions when someone leaves unexpectedly, or even when someone's planned leaving. Someone's going on maternity leave, you know that they're leaving. Someone is still going to have to step in and do their job for them. So currently, where does your prospect data live? I guarantee you, if I took a poll right now and asked you how many of you were managing your sales pipeline with data integrity, 20% of you might be doing 80% of what needs to be done. So where is that prospect data living? It's living on your sales rep's phone. Every contact in your organization is living in your sales rep's private phone. If you're not issuing them company telephones, company laptops, if you've brought someone in and allowed them to use their own devices, all of your company information is living in their personal devices. And even if you are distributing company phones, I guarantee you half of your prospect data is still living in some crappy Dropbox. Not that Dropbox is crappy, but they've got it in their personal Dropbox. They're working on files, they're working on, like, it's living somewhere where you don't want it to be and where you're not going to be able to retrieve it if they leave. It's living in their head. If your prospects are going out and networking and collecting 100 business cards, those business cards may or may not be making it back into your system. They're probably sitting on their dresser at home. And the sales rep probably believes that his memory is good enough that he's going to be able to follow up on all the people that he met. It's not going to where it needs to be, which is into your CRM or your PSA. And half of it's living on a yellow tablet in your sales rep's briefcase, because instead of taking notes in the CRM, because most of your sales reps are probably closer to my age than they are to your kids' age. They feel more comfortable taking notes using paper and a pen than they do typing it into the system. So maybe they do both. And if that's the case, then they are extraordinarily inefficient. Like you take notes in one place, in the CRM or the PSA, writing all your notes down on a piece of paper. That paper eventually makes its way into the garbage, into their house, or it just goes nowhere, right? You've got all of this information living on a yellow lined tablet. So here are the nightmare scenarios around poorly planning for sales session. You hire a sales rep or a telemarketer and they've used their own devices. So you've decided to hire a third-party telemarketer and they work from their own home and they use their own CRM system and all they do is send you meetings. They work with you for a year and then they quit. Now at this time, you don't have a pipeline. That person has a pipeline. It's on their machine, they own it, they are under no obligation to give it to you. When they leave, it goes with them. Then they go to work for a competitor, and you just paid somebody for a year to hand all of your information over to somebody else. That's what happens when you're not properly managing data integrity. Your data just lives everywhere and you never have control over it. Nightmare 2. You've got a good sales rep and they're pretty good at taking notes and tracking day-to-day activities. You don't monitor them that closely because their numbers are good. And she works for you for several years, so you've built a lot of trust with each other. You don't feel the need to check in. Her numbers are where they need to be. You're not going to babysit her. But then they go on maternity leave and decide not to return to work. You hire someone to replace her. You're pretty content that they're going to be able to do the job just as well because your other sales rep was so good and was so great at taking notes. Your replacement discovers that her notes consisted of shorthand abbreviations that no one else can decipher. Right? She abbreviated everything. She used numbers. She used initials. They're gobbledygook. They're garbage. She understood what they meant. Nobody else does. And to make matters worse, she used her personal calendar for sales appointments. So you have no idea what level anything in your CRM is at because she took all of that, kept it on her personal phone because that kept her more organized. So now this great healthy pipeline that you spent 2 years building is totally non-transferable and you've got to start over again. That's how Groundhog Day begins again. Nightmare 3. Your sales rep was great with referrals, but they've stopped coming in. You didn't pay much attention because they were closing business consistently. This happens all the time. Nobody pays attention to their top performers. Right? The top performers get to do whatever they like as long as they keep closing business. That is going to hurt you in the long run. So this person never updates the CRM because he sees his prospects socially all the time. It's a fairly small, tight-knit community. He belongs to the golf club. He plays squash. He's got a really good memory. It's never been a problem before, so you don't pay much attention to it. Then he has a heart attack on the squash court, and I feel the need to tell you that he survived because we're not morbid people here, but he doesn't return to work. That pipeline is gone, and that was the only pipeline you had. You weren't doing anything other than relying on this sales rep to continue working his referral network. There was no calling going into the system. There was no data going into the system. But since sales were coming into the system, that never bothered you before. It should bother you. It should keep you up at night. Nightmare 4. Now this is about those of you who are doing your own prospecting. If you've just started your MSP and you're doing your own sales prospecting, are you keeping the notes that you should? You're busy, you're the CEO, notes are for everyone else. You hire a sales rep, they follow your lead, and now nobody knows anything ever. And you start wasting hours and hours in meetings about business development. What are they doing? Where is their pipeline? Then you get frustrated and you fire them. And now you're back to doing all of your own business development yourself and your pipeline is empty. I know this nightmare well because this happened to us. At the beginning, I enforced everybody else using the CRM, but I just did whatever I want. I own the business. I can do whatever I like, right? Turns out that really hurt us in year 2 when we hired a sales rep and we expected them to be able to pick up right where I left off and begin generating new opportunities. It was impossible for them. They were repeating things that I'd already done because I hadn't taken notes effectively, for example. So when you are planning for future success, even if you've just started your MSP today, and the idea of hiring a sales rep is so far away and so foreign to you that you can't even imagine when you're going to be able to do it, act as if starting right now, just in case. 2 years from now, you may be hiring a sales rep and you'll want them to understand everything that you've already done. First of all, so they understand what relationships not to go in and tromp all over. And second of all, to know what things you've already discounted, right? Like, do you really want them starting over with a brand new list when you've already identified that these 200 companies in your area can't afford to work with you or don't have enough desktops? You need to plan for growth and succession. So data integrity should ensure that anybody can pick up where anyone else left off. So if I walked out of my business today, somebody should be able to sit down in my chair and start prospecting exactly where I left off from the previous day. Right? All of my notes are up to date. All of our user-defined fields are coordinated. Everyone can find everything. So this ensures that you're always going to maintain ownership of the most valuable sales asset that you have, and that is your data. With the proper amount of data, almost anybody can sell. So, and this isn't a poll, but I just want you to think about this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well are you and your team managing your data today? Can you find everything at the push of a button? Do you know what stage every deal in your pipeline is at? Do you know how well your sales reps are performing compared to other people in your industry, or how they're performing compared to other people on your team? And is the only unit for measurement that you're using converted and closed deals? Part of why that becomes a problem, if that's your only unit of measurement, how many sits did you go on and how many of those did you close? If that's your only unit of measurement, new sales reps will never perform well. You bring in a new guy and he doesn't have an established book of business. If you were expecting him to be able to perform at the same level that you as the business owner, who's receiving all the referrals in your market, have been performing to, or your sales rep who's been with you for 5 years has been performing to, you're going to be sadly disappointed. And that's one of the reasons that new MSP owners hiring their first sales reps struggle. They don't know what the numbers look like. They don't know how to measure that. All they see is a guy that seems to be churning, like spinning his wheels and getting nothing accomplished. However, if you were looking at your pipeline in 3 different funnels, you could see all of his activities in those 3 funnels. Here's how much work sales rep did just looking for new information today, and here's how many follow-ups they completed on time and on schedule, and here's how many sits they went on. Right? You can see what levels of work they're completing at each level in your sales pipeline, and as their career moves forward, they're going to close more deals, not because they're getting better at their job so much, but because they're at that process now where data integrity has been taken care of. They can identify everything in the pipeline, and they are able to draw a line clearly between this company is going to be ready to buy at this time, so we need to market to them in this fashion. As you get closer to a buying trigger, your marketing is going to change. You're going to increase the number of times that you reach out to them, and you're probably going to increase how you market to them. Right? I'm not taking anyone for dinner who isn't going to buy something from me for 3 years. But if we're 6 months away from that decision, you better believe I'm taking that guy out for dinner. So how do you improve that number? And that speaks to culture, right? It all comes down to building a culture that values data integrity. So the first thing you need to do is make it easy. The easier it is for your team to manage data, the more likely it is that they're going to adhere to your processes. So one of the ways you want to do that is to eliminate as much redundancy as you can. If your sales rep has to enter the same stuff 4 or 5 different times in 4 or 5 different places, I guarantee you they're going to stop doing that, especially if they're a good sales rep and you just know you're not going to fire them if they're not doing their data entry, because they make you money. And again, we discussed that a little bit earlier. That will hurt you long term if that superstar ever leaves you. You want to automate as much as possible. So especially in that second funnel where you're getting from we know everything we need to know to they're ready to sit down and talk about buying, you want to automate how often you reach out to them. You can automate emailing them. You can automate scheduling follow-ups to call them. You can invite them to events, and all of that can be automated. The more of it you can take off your sales rep's plate, the more likely it is that they are going to be successful. You want them to have time to work on funnel 1, 2, and 3. You don't want them bogged down in funnel 2 doing all kinds of things that technically your CRM or PSA should be able to handle for them. And if you don't know how to do that, reach out to the people that you bought your sales tool from and get them to teach you. Hire a consultant for a few hours and get them to teach you. I know looking at professional services sometimes appears overwhelming, right? When I looked at the cost to customize our CRM database, for example, I thought, we'll make do with what we have for a while. But making do with what we had lost us a lot of money in the long term because we missed opportunities. We dropped the ball on things. We couldn't find anything. We had to redo all kinds of stuff. If you have the opportunity and you've got the money in your pocket right now to spend some time customizing your database so that data integrity becomes second nature to your company, you should definitely be making that investment. And start where you are. Now, you don't have to abandon what you're doing right now in favor of a whole big new shiny sales tool. If you're using ConnectWise, you don't have to abandon ConnectWise and go buy Salesforce, right? Use what you have, customize it to the best of your ability, and only reinvent the wheel if it's absolutely necessary. Because I can tell you from experience, retraining your sales team on a whole new tool is a nightmare. Teaching them to do a couple of extra steps, not so challenging. And automating those steps, that's best case scenario. You want to incent your team to show their work, and this comes down to culture. People need to know that it's important. So how that applies to sales reps who think they're too good to do their data entry is your sale counts. Obviously, you're going to pay commission on your sale, but your sale counts more. You make more money when we review and discover that you adhered to process on this deal, right? So if the deal closes and you see big gaping holes in the pipeline from when you started talking to them to when you closed the deal, you only get the regular amount of commission. If you did everything exactly the way that you were supposed to, you make more money. And that is a language that sales reps understand. You tie their variable compensation to adherence to policy. And don't let your superstars slide, because one day that superstar is going to leave you. And if they haven't done the work the way that you've outlined and you've let it go because they were making you money, you're not going to keep making money. You have to be able to plan for succession, even with your superstars. And most important, lead by example. You set the pace for your team. And if it's important to you, it's important. If you're not doing it, that sends a very strong message to your team that it's really not as important as you're saying it is. So make sure that you're the one demonstrating to your organization why data integrity is valuable, why you do this every day, and make sure you're demonstrating it by actually doing it. So if data integrity is part of your culture, it's something that you hire and fire to. So if you hire the best sales guy in the world and he will not follow policy, you need to part ways with that guy. It's part of your culture. That's how you create culture. You hold it up against your core values and you say, data integrity is one of our core values. This person does not meet that. And there's lots of ways to test before you hire someone whether or not they're going to be able to adhere to something. I mean, it seems very uncomplicated, data entry, but it takes a certain personality to be able to sit silently and enter data into something when they're far more excited by the idea of moving on to the next call. So how can managed sales pros help you? Well, we can help you create the process you need to successfully manage your prospecting in-house. So if you don't know where to start, we can help you. We'll come in, we'll help you get set up, we'll walk you through what you need to change, and we'll help your team get better at it as well. We can train your team to prospect in a way that fosters data integrity. So if currently your sales reps aren't collecting information, we can teach them how to do that in a way that doesn't disrupt your company. And we can also do your prospecting for you, which would totally eliminate the need to create a process or manage a team. Either way, we'd love to help. And with that, I'll open up the floor for questions.
Great, thanks, Gary. If anyone has any questions, you could submit them in the questions or chat panel to the right of your GoToWebinar screen.
Okay, so the question is, how often do you need to reevaluate new parameters in your data? It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So for our company, I can give an example. Every time we work with a new vendor, they want to know something new about the market. So we would add a new user-defined field to our database that then everybody would be required to retrieve information on. So let's say we onboarded somebody and it was imperative to them that the prospects that they were calling were a Azure partner. Now that would be a question that we wouldn't just ask on their campaign, we would start asking it universally throughout all of our campaigns so that we could better use data for that oncoming campaign. So you reevaluate it when you have a need for new information. If you're starting from a place of zero data, you want to start with little things, right? Like if nobody's collecting any information right now, all of a sudden making them collect 20 different data points is really going to overwhelm them. So start with simple things. We're going to start with determining how many desktops and how many servers the companies that we're calling into have, and we're going to do that by talking to the receptionist or the office manager or anybody, right? We don't have to talk to a decision maker. We can talk to anybody to start cleaning out those data points. I hope that answers your question, and if not, you know what, my contact information is right there and you can follow up with me after.
All right, Carrie, it looks like that's all the questions we have today.
All right, well, thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Great. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, you as well.